Nintendo without a doubt won E3, although I don't think it was that great of a feat, seeing as how we just saw CGI trailers, concepts, and cloud services from the other conferences. They ended their direct with an absolute bang, showing off that they had Breath of the Wild 2 in development. I couldn't properly formulate thoughts because it was coming off the wake of that Banjo announcement. No, K-Rool's sleeping with them too! Alright, I'm allowed to be this excited. I've been waiting for this for almost 2 decades since I played Banjo-Tooie on my N64. Now that the hype has really settled in and I got to sleep on my thoughts, I came to the realization that this might be the very most polarizing Zelda game in the entire series. Before we get into what I mean by that, let's look at the first announcement trailer of the original Breath of the Wild. We have an open field and a guardian, and this really showed off the open world aspect of Breath of the Wild. Link runs in on a horse and takes off his hood, again showing a gameplay aspect that was the clothing and that they actually have effects on the game. He then jumps off his horse and pulls out an ancient arrow, again that you can jump off your mount and it slows down time, and an ancient arrow being an item in the game. So far everything in that original announcement trailer was in the game and was actually showing off gameplay mechanics, teasing them at a really early stage. From this, it was clear that open world was the objective of the original Breath of the Wild. The absolute most important thing that the original announcement trailer was showing off was that nothing was familiar. Link wasn't even donning his iconic tunic. A guardian is a very unfamiliar enemy, not even a familiar variant. It had a straight up steampunk vibe to it. And Link looked so different that everyone thought it was Zelda at the time, but we'll get into that again later. So the most important things to take away from the trailer, disregarding the gameplay mechanics, was that it's an open area and that this is almost a reimagining of the series. Nothing is familiar at all here. And then we look at the announcement trailer for Breath of the Wild 2. We know the characters, we know this version of Link and Zelda pretty well. We know the world, we're going back to Hyrule, and it's the same layout with familiar landmarks being shown. And of course, Ganondorf. The long red hair, the Gerudo insignia, they knew what they were doing. They knew that they were telling us that this is what's gonna happen. We have Zelda and Link exploring a dungeon. Is this gonna say that we're gonna go back to the original format of dungeons versus the whole Divine Beast format? What this announcement trailer tells me is that this is a direct sequel through and through. The fact that we're even in the same world is unbelievable. Because my first reaction when I saw that trailer was I was saying that this is like Majora's Mask, where they hardly ever do a sequel to a game. But even then, we never had a game that brought you back to the exact same version of Hyrule. There's always a leap of realm or a leap of time or something. Now, I'm expecting something to happen on the overworld. Maybe it'll be a dynamic overworld or something, because I can't see it just being the same map and then there's some new mobs and such. This isn't an analysis video though. My point is that the first reveal trailer was showing off that you're put into a new world and a new reimagining of Zelda. Things have changed in this and nothing is familiar. Whereas the Breath of the Wild 2 reveal trailer showed off that we're picking up a story where it left off. And that word I just used is very important, story. Whereas in the first Breath of the Wild, there was a great story. You have to go out of your way to find it, looking for memories, trying to look for dialogue and things to read, such as Zelda's diary. Oh, I'm sorry, research journal. This form of non-linear storytelling is very hard to pull off, especially when it comes to having a climax. And the climax of this story, in my opinion, was Zelda breaking down after literally losing everything. And this is locked away in a memory. So if the majority of people just go through Breath of the Wild and see the champion stories and then fight Calamity Ganon, who some people complain is too much of a pushover, and then others say that that's a design choice, which is a topic for another video, then if this is allowed to happen, then evidently the story is in the background and the gameplay and exploration of Breath of the Wild is first, which is great. Now, many Zelda fans say, and I can kind of agree with this, that Breath of the Wild is a good game, but it doesn't feel like a Zelda game. And one of the reasons is because of this method of storytelling. But this is done for a good reason. Let's look at the defining game design mechanic of Breath of the Wild. The fact that you can just straight up go from the start to Hyrule Castle and beat the game. And now this is important because many people say that this is a return to form, that you can do anything in any order, just like the original Zelda. But even the original Zelda had a sort of Metroid progression where you at least needed to get a few items in order to get to the final boss. Breath of the Wild, however, is the only game where you can go straight to the actual end of the game. And this is why when people tell me that they want to get into the Zelda series, I say Breath of the Wild is to Zelda that Death Note is to anime. You know, the thing that if someone is just entering in or doesn't care about the medium at all, but they're gonna do one thing from the medium, they should do this. As in, you should watch Death Note if you don't watch anime or you don't care about anime. Or you should play Breath of the Wild if you don't care about Zelda or you don't play Zelda. I also, however, say there's 3 types of Zelda games. 2D top-down Zelda, 3D Zelda, and then Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is so much in its own gameplay design that I cannot categorize it in the other 2. It has heavy RPG mechanics like looting and status buffs, the durability, and again, being the only Zelda game where you get all the equipment needed to do anything in the overworld, including going to the final boss. So looking at this, it's very surprising to see that in the Breath of the Wild 2 announcement trailer, we're going back to something that people are familiar with. Whereas the first Breath of the Wild announcement trailer was for anyone, you could literally be anybody and see it and be like, oh, that's interesting, I want to run around and shoot things. But Breath of the Wild 2 was for people that care about Breath of the Wild and people that care about Zelda, because only Zelda fans would see Ganondorf and pop off knowing that that was actually Ganondorf. So if this says anything, it says that Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be catered to the Zelda audience. Being the people that complained about the format of storytelling, the way that the progression works, being that you just have the runes and you can do anything, you don't need to unlock a certain item in order to progress. And of course, dungeons. There's something telling in just the score of Breath of the Wild where you don't really hear the Zelda themes such as Zelda's Lullaby until like the end of the game pretty much. And the rest is all its original score with ambient piano music. Again, but that's to play into the design of exploration and isolation, and that it's you against the wilderness. Now, why Breath of the Wild 2 will be so damn polarizing? Because again, from the reveal trailer, it looks like we are back to a story-driven experience. And if it's story-driven, that means they have to have a more linear game design. Maybe we'll have more dungeons. You can do the dungeons in any order, but you have to get something there to progress the story. I can't see it being an alinear storytelling such as the first game. And it was alinear again because you can do anything. I mean, the only way we go back to an alinear storytelling is what? If Ganondorf breaks out, puts Zelda in a crystal again, and then Link passes out, and then he wakes up and Ganondorf took over everything, a la Ocarina of Time. But again, you can just run right to Ganondorf and then kill him. God, I hope that doesn't happen. I really think that this one's going to be multiplayer, or that at least you can play as a combination of Link and Zelda or Zelda. But at the end of the day, I believe that Zelda will be playable in this one, especially after the backlash of the original Breath of the Wild announcement trailer. I also think that this is going to go back to an original dungeon exploration type thing where you go into a larger dungeon, you have to solve puzzles, and maybe progress through an item or not, but that it will be larger dungeons and that you have to complete the dungeons because maybe there'll be some story thing about it. So if Breath of the Wild 2 is for Breath of the Wild fans, but also trying to go back to the original Zelda fans of a more story and linear experience, then this is a very curious case. Because on the one hand, I do like the 3D Zeldas for what they are. Again, a more Metroid style experience where you have to get a certain item. Even if you can do dungeons in specific orders, you still have to beat the dungeons in order to get to the final boss. And I do like Breath of the Wild's design where you just get all the equipment you need right away. So to mesh the two styles together is going to be very interesting. I think it's going to really split the fan base, that people are going to be really into it because, well, I'm going to be into it because it's a well-produced Zelda game. But that if it's more linear and more focused on story, some people are going to hate it because it's like, oh, it's not the open world nature of the original Breath of the Wild or the old Zelda games. The way I see it, the sweet spot is if it's Breath of the Wild exploration, you can go to any dungeon in any order. Please give us the old dungeon designs where you solve a lot of puzzles and maybe you can get something within the dungeon to progress things along. A more developed idea of the Divine Beast where you get a gimmick within the dungeon alone to manipulate things, but more developed than just rotating a platform. Because I think that Breath of the Wild should still maintain that design of you have all the equipment you need immediately to do whatever. And you don't need some power bracelet to unlock a certain area. There needs to be a sweet spot, because I do want a story that progresses within the time of the actual game. That, you know, Ganondorf gets released and then a story is progressing in real time and Link and Zelda have to defeat Ganondorf and you see the world responding to Ganondorf. People are saying this looks like the Majora's Mask of Breath of the Wild, and I can see that. You know, it's got a lot more darker tones, the eerie atmosphere, the eerie reverse audio tracks. But what made Majora's Mask so well was seeing the way that the inhabitants of Termina responded to the impending doom of the moon. And this could really be possible with Hyrule, going to different cities and seeing the way that they evolve with Ganondorf's control over Hyrule. And maybe actually that's how Hyrule Field will develop over time, that Ganondorf is gaining control. Again though, for something like that to happen, it would be a more linear experience. Still open world with RPG aspects, able to go to any area, but linear in the fact that you can't just go to the end right away. You have to actually go through the story, individual stories of each area, and see the development within that area. Think of how cool it would be if we saw something like Kakariko Village burning down, but in real time, and you could see the effect of everyone, since they actually have really good NPC dialogue in Breath of the Wild, and I expect the same level in Breath of the Wild too. That would be the ideal game for me, because I do really like both. I love everything Zelda. When I say both, meaning the old 3D designs, the 2D, go to whatever dungeon design, and Breath of the Wild, its own thing. The 3D Zeldas got way too linear though, and Breath of the Wild is too open to have an actual linear real-time narrative unfold. But no matter what, with Breath of the Wild 2 not being exactly like Breath of the Wild, it's gonna be polarizing for the fan base. And that's what I'm getting at. The only things I can see common is the RPG mechanics of, you know, weapon durability, runes, increasing your stamina and health, cooking, and the exploration. I expect something in Breath of the Wild 2, like a more developed version of going to a Divine Beast, where you go to the Divine Beast and there's a small linear story, you know, you see some cutscenes, you talk to the NPCs around, and then you do the Divine Beast. But much more developed, where you're actually progressing and being a part of the active fight of Ganondorf's forces, because they're really taking over in real time, with Ganondorf at the lead and not just some disembodied head that is Calamity Ganon. That's the beauty of Ganondorf. There's actually an intelligent being behind it. And with showing Hyrule Castle collapsing, an emphasis on a dynamic open world experience. Anyways, what do you guys think? What's your experience with Zelda? I know some of you guys might have Breath of the Wild being your only experience with Zelda. I know some people who only care for the 3D Zeldas. Some people only care for the 2D Zeldas. I love all of it. What do you expect from Breath of the Wild 2? What do you want out of it? Also, this is really my first type of video where I kind of do a discussion type thing, but it really is just off the top of my head and thoughts that I've been formulating, because I want to get videos out fast. And although I still do want a more scripted, more heavily edited type format on my channel, those are going to be more sparse because they do take a lot of time. This is easier for me to do. I just want to get my thoughts out. Let me know what you think about this format, or if I should just stick to, you know, more Let's Play highlights. If you can tell, my video formats have been all over the place, so I really do appreciate the feedback. It does help a lot while I'm trying to figure out what the hell my content really is, since I can't stream on YouTube anymore. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you're new here, please do subscribe for more discussions and watch me play silly games. If you like the video, please leave a like so that others may see it and join in on the conversations. And I do upload more frequently now, so hit the bell for notifications, yada yada yada. And I will see you guys in the next video or stream. Bye-bye.